Welcome back, everybody. Another episode of Everybody Needs a Nudge. We are a little off schedule today because we have a special guest. This is what episode is this episode 10 of season 2?
10.
10, but we were on a pretty steady every other week schedule, but not this week because we have a very special guest, an international guest
From across the pond.
from across the pond, Ian Philion. How are you, sir?
Extraordinarily well. And yourself?
I'm wonderful. So Ian is Charlie's, for all of our listeners out there, tens and listeners that we have, Ian is Charlie Philion, who works here and has been on the podcast, has been a guest
Indeed,
on the
I
podcast.
watched it last week. I was very impressed with you.
Wow.
Ooh.
Yes, we'll get into that and some of the accolades that were bestowed upon me earlier in the day. I try to expand my command of the English language when I have somewhat of Mr. Philion's ilk in the building, because the English have such a wonderful handle on the English language.
Well, it's ours, so I suspect it. However, the Americans have added vast swathes of terminology to English,
They have.
many of which we find loathsome, some of which we find objectionable, but a number of which have added immeasurably to the pleasure of using English as a spoken and written language.
Well, there you go. That's quite a what's the word I'm looking for? That's quite the. See, I can't now. I'm stumbling over my words. An endorsement of the English language, but I will say that one thing that struck me today. We're in here and we're talking about the equipment, and you called them cans. I'm
Yes.
wearing my cans, and he's not wearing his cans.
No cans. Headphones.
Now,
The problem is my spectacles.
yes,
Right.
also known as glasses.
I'm say
Also
again.
known as glasses.
Well, they are, yes,
Yeah.
but then you say radio and I say wireless.
Okay, all
Yes.
right. What do you call a cell phone?
I call it a cellular
Cellular
telephone.
phone.
Mobile.
Cellular
Or
telephone.
a mobile phone.
Mobile
That's
phone.
what I expected.
But
Yeah.
actually, most people nowadays simply say the word iPhone, don't they?
They
It's
do.
become the same as any acronymic like BIC for a biro, which actually comes from the French Bic brothers in the 1880s, or Hoover for a vacuum
Yeah, or
cleaner.
jacuzzi.
Yes.
Jacu-
Oh, is that a... No, I didn't know
That's a
that.
brand. A jacuzzi
Right,
is the
okay.
brand.
No,
yeah.
I didn't
Oh, I didn't know that either.
Yeah, learn something new every day here on the podcast. Yeah,
Wow.
I
incredible,
always
right?
remember Richard Pryor's comment about jacuzzi.
What did he say? I don't know.
He said that
This
he
is a
had
clean
them-
show.
I'm nervous.
He said he had them at home. They weren't actually wired up or electrified in any way. He just used to get in them with indigestion. It did the same job.
Oh,
You've got an edit button, I'm sure.
no, that's clean. We
That's
can leave
clean.
that in.
That's clean.
So we'll touch on a few things, but the other thing we need to discuss a little bit here is a very pointed question that our guest asked, which is, what root is root beer made from?
The sassafras.
Well, see, we asked that question when we were talking about your nickname, and he inquired as to the origin of root beer.
Right.
And the sassafras, you told me, also makes sarsaparilla. And I mentioned to you that when I was a child, Jamaican immigrants to Britain used to drink sarsaparilla, and during the winter they'd drink it hot, and you could buy it on the streets, hot sarsaparilla for 1 halfpenny for half a pint.
This is in England.
This is in England, and it tasted then as it tastes today like warm lavatory cleaner.
Lavatory is also known as the bathroom for everybody out there. So we're gonna get into where you were born and raised and how you ended up. You know the gist behind the show, right?
I've seen one episode
Okay.
with my son.
Okay. All right. So essentially, the idea here is we're going to discuss your life and sort of the nudges, which was a play on my nickname. So my nickname is Nudge. My last name was Nigerian.
Right.
Obviously, nudge also means to sort of bump somebody along or influence them some way or one way or another. There's actually a book here. You can see it right there called Nudge, and that's a marketing book. And essentially what that talks about is how economics are influenced by the placement of items, right?
I see they're quoting Stephen D. Levitt, the author of Freakonomics,
Yes.
which I read. The quote is, "One of the few books I've read recently that fundamentally changes the way I think about the world." I think they should have cut it short to "one of the few books I've read recently."
Burn.
Are you saying that the
I read Freakonomics and was dismayed with the simplicity of the thinking behind it.
and now he's endorsing this book, so I don't know what that
Indeed,
says
so
about. Yeah.
doesn't that tell you something?
Tells you everything you need to know. What it tells me is that you're not going to read that book. That's what it tells me.
Actually, I now will read it and write you a report.
I would appreciate
just
that.
out of pure cussedness.
So I went camping, and I don't know if did you go? Have you ever been camping?
Life under canvas.
Yeah. Have you done it?
There were two things I found objectionable on the one occasion I did it.
Okay.
The first one was that a cow sat on my tent during the middle of the night.
Yeah,
and
that's
I
not
couldn't
good.
move my left leg
Yeah.
for about an hour.
That
and a
seems like
half.
bad luck.
And the second thing was the lavatory, or as I call it, or as you call it, toilet facilities
Yeah.
were rather like those that to be found in the Flintstones abode. In
A bit rudimentary,
a
shall we
little
say?
rudimentary, exactly.
So I went camping for the first time in my life. I'm 47 years old. I didn't grow up camping. My father was
so
not a
much
camper.
older.
Oh, thanks. I appreciate that.
No,
I walked into that
it's
one.
wisdom on
Yeah.
your forehead.
Is that what it is?
Yes.
I think it might be worry.
I don't think so.
So I went camping for the first time and on a place called Clark's Island. And this is an interesting story. So Clark's Island, I now live in a town called Duxbury, so short town, just north of Plymouth, Massachusetts, which of course is where the
And I grew up in Plymouth, England,
the symmetry
where
is just.
the Pilgrim Fathers set off for the brave new world.
And they landed. So this is
Plymouth
perfect. You're
Rock.
gonna like this. You're gonna like this story. I'm telling you. So in Duxbury Bay, if you can picture it, Plymouth is on one side, Kingston, and then Duxbury's over here, and right in the middle is Clark's Island, named after a pilgrim who was on the Mayflower, last name Clark. Now the story goes that when they came into Duxbury Bay, it was the holy day. It was a Sunday, and they actually landed on this island, which is now named after Clark. So it's called Clark's Island, and they landed. They walked the island, and they quickly realized that they were on an island, that this wasn't the mainland. But because it was the Sabbath, they weren't going to work anymore on Sunday, and they went and they had services on this island, Clark's Island. There's a big giant rock in the middle of it, which is now called Pulpit Rock. They had their services. They rested for the day. The next day, they woke up. They got back in their shallop, and across the bay they went to what is now known as Plymouth, Massachusetts. So the true first landing was on this Clark's Island.
Wow.
Which is it's in the town that I live in, and it's where I camped. That did not make camping any more agreeable with me, shall we say.
You feel the same as I, perhaps.
Yeah. Sleeping outside is not. So everybody's after, the joke was that they were all campers. There were 4 adults, myself and 3 others, and then 4 kids, my son Hank's age, which is 12, and they had all camped before. And so they were saying after, "Oh, you're a camper now, Nudge. You're a camper." I said, No. I've camped.
Exactly.
I am not a camper.
That has a completely different meaning in Britain, by the way.
Camping?
To be camp.
Oh, what does it mean?
It means that you have tendencies towards the more effeminate side of your nature.
Oh, you're in touch with your feminine side.
I like to think I am.
Yeah, me too.
Although I'd make a repellent female,
Yeah.
I suspect.
Yeah. Well, I'm not sure you make
Mind you,
that great
I
looking
make
of a male
repellent
either.
Male, come to think of that, so I really don't have far to go, do I? You're quite right.
But what I found very interesting was on this island, there was a fire hydrant. Don't you think that's interesting? Why would there be a fire hydrant on the island?
City ordinance of 1875 said there had to
Giant
be.
red fire hydrant right in the middle of the island. I want to know where they're getting the water from that.
Well, presumably from an artesian spring of some
Yeah,
kind.
but I mean, we're in the middle of middle of the ocean.
No, it doesn't mean you can't be a light, does it? Vesuvius is in the middle of the ocean.
Yes, it
It's a
is. This is
light.
true. This is
Right.
true. This is why I ask the questions. This is why we bring these things up on the
Bikini
podcast.
Atoll was in the middle of the ocean, but it burned for about 7 days after you dropped a bomb on it in 1950.
What, me? I didn't have anything to do with that. I wasn't even
use
alive.
you as the apotheosis of all things American.
Ah, got it. Okay. So
Yes.
I am now the representative of this terrible
You
hatred
are.
land
Yes.
that supports, three-quarters of the world. But we're not going to get into, so a couple rules here. No politics. We're not going to talk about religion. And what's the other thing? No,
No trigger topic.
yeah, no trigger topics.
What is a trigger topic?
Well, what do you think a trigger topic
I think
is?
it's something that triggers a kind of
You
exasperated
can't. Yeah.
tirade of words
Like
that come out thereafter.
A polarizing.
Yeah,
subject.
that's a good way to think of it, right? Anything where we want our listeners to enjoy the story of how you got where you were. We don't want them to like or dislike you based on your views of the world, whether it's global warming or whatever else you may.
Now, why do you bring up global warming as if I couldn't bloody well guess?
I don't know. Why would I bring up global warming?
I think it's because I had a dispute with your great leader, Christopher, the other day.
Yeah.
Comil Zong, right? And it was about global warming.
It was.
He was deliberately taunting me and pretending that he believed that none of it existed, that indeed the earth was flat, that lizards and Jews ran the economy and the world, etc.
Yeah.
And so I think that's why he may have mentioned it.
He may have
Or
mentioned
it's
it to me.
purely coincidental.
Nah, it may be. Could be either coincidental or he may have mentioned it. He may have mentioned it.
Shrewd.
But I also heard that both your son and your wife agreed with Chris.
They did.
Yeah.
But they do that as a knee-jerk reaction. Anybody, I was sitting on a boat about 30 years ago, a rather large ship, cruising down from Villefranche down to, in the end, to Sicily. And there were about 150 people on this ship, all of whom were presidents of corporations. And as part of the cruise, which was meant to be partially educational and partially convivial, they'd brought 10 or so Nobel Prize winners, called Nobel laureates, along. And I'd just read an article in Scientific American about freezing ceramics to make very strong magnets. The idea being that once you could get magnets that strong, you could suspend gases in the middle of the air, and if you collided particles in them, you would then have nuclear fusion, and that would be the solution to all problems. And I'd read this article and absorbed a few of the facts, not very many. Anyway, I'm sitting at the table with my wife and the captain and 3 or 4 of these Nobel laureates, and I'm holding forth about my knowledge of cryogenic magnets. And one of them looks up and strokes his rather small goatee beard and says, "You understand nothing of my work." And I said, "I'm sorry?" I said, I've just read an article in Scientific American on cryogenic magnets. He said,
Come
"But
at me.
I've just won the Nobel Prize for it," he said. And I wrote the article. And my wife said, "Good, somebody's finally put that little shit in his place."
Well, I think that's a great segue to get into your life, Ian, and sort of how it all started. How did you get to a point where you were riding around on boats with Nobel laureates? I've never met a Nobel laureate. Have you?
Nope.
Nope. Not even close.
No.
You may be sitting next to the next one.
Oh, wow.
Who knows?
Ooh, you got something going on?
No.
Ah, you seem
Just
kind of
my-
old to be getting that award.
I think I'm rather too old for
Yeah.
that now. I've been
That's a young
although
man's
the average
game.
age of Nobel laureates is in their mid-70s. They tended to do their best work in their late 20s to mid-30s, and it takes about 40 years for the committee in Sweden to decide that the work they did had a profound influence on the world and therefore to award a Nobel Prize.
So a lot of those awards must be given out posthumously.
A certain amount are given posthumously,
Yeah.
yes. There's a very good film you may have seen, an Alfred Hitchcock film called Torn Curtain.
Torn Curtain?
Or another one called The Prize. Torn Curtain has Paul Newman and Julie Andrews, who played Mary Poppins. It's a very good Hitchcock film about a Nobel laureate going to Sweden to receive his prize.
Really?
Very, very good. But then Newman was a very persuasive actor.
He's a great actor.
Very, very subtle.
Yeah, he's in a lot of films. He plays a lot of different roles. He's quite good at what he does.
Sadly, no longer with
No,
us.
sadly, no longer
Gone
with
to
us.
play his final role in the sky. That of corpse number one.
I know. Jeez. So, all right. Well, where were you born?
I was born in London, in the centre of London.
Now, you told me earlier you still live in the centre of London.
I do.
Yeah.
I moved away. I had very bad bronchitis, a chest disorder, when I was 7 or 8 years old.
So, but were there any brothers or sisters?
None whatsoever. They deliberately broke the mold.
Wow,
when
you're
I
an
was
only
born.
child.
My mother
That
said,
explains a lot.
That'll do for this lifetime.
Yeah, that's it. Just one of this guy. That's it.
Wasn't there a Jacqueline Suzanne novel called Once Is More Than Enough or something like that? But
There
anyway.
might be, but I have no idea who that woman is or what she wrote.
Well, you should try airport reading. It's by far the best.
Yeah. So you grow up. You
So
grew
I
up an
grew up in
only
London.
child
I grew up an only
in the
child.
city of London
My
in
mother
the early 1800s.
in the late 1750s.
Oh, okay.
Actually. It was 10 to 6 in normal terms. And my mother was going through a succession of husbands at the time. She's now 94, lives in Turkey with her either 7th or 8th
Oh,
husband.
God love her. Were
What
they
a nice way of putting that.
a succession of husbands?
Well, it seemed...
Was she killing them? Were they dying?
Only smothering them, I think, is the word. Smothering them. She was a very particular kind of individual.
Yeah.
And knew what she liked and tolerated and what she would not like and not tolerate.
Yeah.
And after
for
a
her.
while, they tended to leave one afternoon and never really come back. And so she got through a few of those. And therefore, by the time I was about 7, I was farmed out to my grandparents.
Okay.
And they brought me up.
No, but you said you had bronchitis.
I had bronchitis. Now, my grandfather...
No, I don't mean to be fresh, but what year are we talking here?
I was born in 1953. I'm 69
69 years old. Okay.
That's a very quick arithmetic.
Yeah.
By the way.
Well, I got to have a good math mind around here with all these
Clearly,
numbers.
clearly.
Yeah.
And my grandfather was at that time about my age now.
Okay.
When he brought me up. So he was born in the late 1880s, early 1890s. He fought in the First World War, and he was capsized. His ship was blown out of the water by the Germans in Jutland, and he survived as a 17-year-old boy. And he decided to change from the Navy because he didn't want to swim in boiling oil ever again to the Army. So halfway through the war, he dropped a rank or two and joined the Army. And he ended up fighting at the Battle of the Somme, which was an absolute massacre.
Yeah.
And he's the only, or was at the time, the only living serviceman to have both fought at Jutland and the Somme.
Wow.
Now,
What was his name?
His name was Ray, R-A-E, and he was a Jew.
R-A-E Philion?
Yes.
Write that down, please.
Anyway.
You're not writing it down.
I'm writing it down.
Okay.
So the family fled from Omsk to Staten Island.
Okay, so they came to America.
1902. They took one look at New York and decided it wasn't for them.
Yeah.
Back on the boat and ended up in Liverpool.
So they went back.
England. No, they went to Liverpool.
Right, but they went back overseas.
Yeah. And
Wow.
otherwise, I'd be sitting interviewing you.
Maybe.
Anyway, and he brought me up in a rather Victorian fashion.
Okay.
Which was actually good for me because I needed a certain amount of reining in. My excesses have always been rather too excessive.
And so he was a disciplinarian.
He had no problem about that, and nor did I, oddly enough.
Yeah.
I mean, I went to school at a time when everybody could cane you.
Yeah.
Your housemaster could cane you, your headmaster could cane you, your teacher could cane you, the prefects could cane you. So I spent my life bending over. Don't take that the wrong way.
Skaboom. Ba-dum, boom. I don't even know where to go. There's like 50 jokes I could go with there.
I'm sure you could.
Which
is why I fed you the line. Yeah. You were kind enough to back yourself into the spotlight.
Yes, I'm going to leave that one alone.
So everybody caned you all the time.
You were constantly getting caned.
Constantly
You bent over and
beaten.
caned
Yeah.
over and over and over again.
Yeah.
Just non-stop caning. Cane, cane, cane.
17 years of it. Anyway, so I went to school. I went away
Got
to
to the
school.
point where you enjoyed the cane.
Well, that's meant to be called the English disease, isn't it?
Oh, I
We all
guess
like
it-
to be whipped to arouse ourselves. It's not actually true. I've neither wanted to whip nor be whipped at any point during my life.
That's good to know.
Glad we
Yeah.
clarified.
Yeah, that was one of the questions I had. I crossed that one off.
I'm sure it was. Do you want to get through all the ones?
Yeah. No, well, that one we're good. We're gonna knock that one out. So at 7 years old, you go to live with your grandparents.
Yes, and I contract quite poor bronchitis at the time, or quite good bronchitis, it must be said. So much so that he returns to his roots in the Navy and takes me from central London, which in those days was still plagued by a lot of coal fires and the atmosphere keeping him down, hence the London fog and London smog. And in 1952, I think 9,000 people died in London during the Great Smog. 1952.
Yeah, it's not that long ago to be
it's
dying of something like
extraordinary,
that.
isn't
Yeah.
it? So we go off to Plymouth, which is Aeolian, and the breezes are balmy and blowing in from the Atlantic. Probably if you took a line straight through this office and kept going for 3,800 miles, you'd hit Plymouth Sound.
Okay.
You know, because that's really where it is.
Straight
it's
across.
more or less on the same meridian,
Yep.
more or less. So it was a good place if you had lung disorders to grow up, because it's fresh and easy. However, it was a very small, somewhat enclosed community.
Okay.
And my grandfather decided that it was not big enough for my education, if that makes any sense.
Of course it does, yeah.
So he then revealed to me something I hadn't known, that in fact he was a Jew.
Okay.
And while my grandmother wasn't Jewish, and it's meant to be carried through the female line, you may or may not know,
I do now.
he said that I'm going to prepare you to be bar mitzvahed, which means you'll have to learn Hebrew, and I will also introduce you to the rabbi here, who I vaguely know. So he did both of those things, and I got on quite well with the rabbi, who taught me to play chess. And the rabbi said, you shouldn't be here, you should go away to school. And my grandfather said, well, that's really an impossibility, because they weren't rich. My grandfather was a carpenter. And he said, well, why don't you enter in for scholarships at school, which I did, and I was lucky enough to achieve one. And the Plymouth Hebrew community sent me away to school and paid for my uniforms and books. And
so what grade is this? What age, what grade?
Well, we don't have grades so much.
Of course they don't have grades.
I would have been 7.5 when I went away to
Oh my
school.
goodness, that's young.
Well, Charlie went away to school at 7.5
Yeah.
as well. I think he'd have gone earlier.
If you let him.
He could have reached the door.
If he could have driven the car himself, he would have.
Exactly.
That's about second grade here.
Yeah.
Is it?
7.
Yep.
Yeah, 7.
Anyway, so I went away to school, and I was away at boarding school for all of my childhood.
What was the name of the boarding school? Because they
Well,
have
I went
wonderful
to-
names over there.
I went to 2 or 3 of them. I went to one called Kelly College, which was in Dartmoor in England, which is a wild part of the country. The main school I went to was called Wolverston Hall.
Wolverston Hall.
Wolverston Hall.
All right. I
It
mean,
was the-
you just get smarter saying that word.
It was the family home of Lord Berners and the Berners family, who fell into Berners was a homosexual, so he was the last of his line. And when he died, the school passed into a fair disarray, and then it was bought in about the 1930s and turned into a boys' boarding school.
So it was all boys boarding school.
All boys, and that's good and bad.
Yeah.
It's better for girls, I'm told, than boys.
To have all girls.
Girls do better in single-sex schools.
I
than
can believe
boys
that.
do.
Having daughters and having sons, I can believe that, because there's a lot of social distractions that affect the girls much more than it affects the boys.
You think so?
Yes, right down to like the clothing that they're wearing, the shoes that they're wearing,
Yes.
all that stuff. When you're trying to keep up with the Joneses,
Yeah.
the 14, 15-year-old girls get caught up in that.
Yes.
or did the boyfriend say hello to me in the hall or not say hello to me in the hall? You know, my experience, now my son's only 12, so he's not in that social world just yet. But my experience as a young man, like, I didn't care about any of that. I didn't care what anybody else was wearing. It didn't matter to me.
I don't think any of the boys with whom I went to school were fashion icons,
right?
Models. They really didn't care. You stole anything that would fit you from anybody else.
Right.
And everything was just in piles like a mountain range.
Yeah.
Nobody put anything away. Everything was a bloody mess. Everything was filthy. You got new sheets once a week given to you by matron, who had them laundered outside the school. And rather than bother to change the bed, you trampled the new sheets to make them look like they'd been used and handed them in again. You know,
and you just left the old sheets on the bed.
There was penicillin growing in people's lockers.
Yeah.
It was just foul.
They've done studies on that. They put a bunch of young men in a room by themselves, no parents, no anything, and then they did the same thing with a bunch of girls. And the boys started out well.
I can see where this might be going.
Towards the end of it, it was who's the one that's going to be in charge, and everything was dirty, and they couldn't decide what role everyone played.
Yeah.
And then you went over to the women, and they were, well, the girls, and they were, somebody was cooking, somebody was cleaning, somebody was in charge of what they're going to do when they all get together, and it was beautiful.
Have you read Lord of the Flies?
I have not.
And William Golding's book, for which he won the Nobel Prize. Again, it's about 7 boys shipwrecked. In they're between 10 and about 13 years old.
Yeah.
They're shipwrecked on a desert island, and they evolve their own society. It's a magnificently good read.
Yeah.
And if you have children, you can see it.
Yeah.
You can read the book and see it.
Yeah, you can. I can see it now with Hank. You know, like we were on that island out there. You could see it. Who was responsible for making sure they all got their tent up? Who was responsible for making sure the games were going on? Who was responsible? Hey, food's being served. Like, you could see it. You could see the little society forming inside the society.
Winston Churchill said, if you put 2 Englishmen in a room and a third one enters, they'll make a club to keep him out.
So what ages are you at? What's the name of the school?
So I leave school Wolverston
Hall.
How could you forget that?
Oh my God! I just wanted to make sure I said it right. So you leave there when you're how old?
At 17.
Okay, and you go to university, not college, which I love as well. By the way,
I love when Charlie says that.
Me too.
Which one?
University.
Oh, okay. So I go to the varsity is the other way of saying it.
The varsity.
Varsity.
So where do you go?
I go to a school called the London School of Economics, the LSE.
And how do you? What was the nudge that led you to go there? Out of
desperation.
Okay.
I'd say so. Let me think. Now, why? So I was going to go to. I went to do an entrance exam at Cambridge, and that was quite good. And I thought, well, so it's Cambridge, England, not Massachusetts.
Sure.
And I quite liked it, but I made a mistake, and I said I thought I'd want to read English, but actually I decided I didn't want to read English. And you couldn't change. You couldn't say, I'll take the place, but I want to do nuclear physics instead.
Right.
Woodwork.
Right. You couldn't sort of backdoor your way in.
No. So longish sort of summer came along, and somebody said, look, why don't you do law? And I thought about it, and I thought, well, if I were going to do law, I'd want to be an advocate in a court, not a solicitor, as we call them.
Yeah, and what's the difference?
We have 2. If you're an individual and let's say you have a dispute about a house,
okay,
you will go to your solicitor and he will read the documents. He will then pass you on to a specialist, and that specialist is called a barrister.
Okay.
The barrister is the individual that represents you in court. He is your mouthpiece in court. He has to believe that A, you have a case, and B, you are telling him the truth.
Right.
But then he represents you in court. The solicitor does not represent you in court. I was far more interested in being a barrister. Mm-hmm. However, I left that a bit too long as well. So it was coming up to September, middle of September, and I had to register to go somewhere. And the LSE happened to be very close to where I was living in London. and it had a good reputation. It's a globally famous school for economics, so I decided to do philosophy and maths instead. And I got on all right. I had one or two very, very good tutors. There were very small numbers of people doing philosophy and maths. I think there were 6 of us.
Total.
And we were outnumbered 8 to 1, 9 to 1 by teachers.
Wow.
There were a lot of philosophers, a lot of mathematicians, and very few of us. So we got a pretty good education. And I was lucky enough to be the last year that was taught by a very famous philosopher called Sir Karl Popper, who doesn't matter if you don't know him one way or another, but he was very influential in terms of his thinking, particularly his theories about economics. So I got interested in economics. I decided that I would not wish to do my own laundry or travel by bus or
You wanted to make some money.
So
that's what he's saying.
The LSE. Well, no, it wasn't that. I just didn't want to do things I didn't want to do, amongst them cleaning and ironing. Yeah. So I decided I had better earn
or riding
money.
a bus.
So I went to work for a newspaper, and so I used to go to the LSE in the mornings and work for the newspaper in the afternoons.
What newspaper?
The first one I worked for, I've worked for about half a dozen. First one I worked for was the Evening Standard, then one called the Financial Times that most people know.
Yeah.
It's a pink-coloured paper. The London Observer, which is a Sunday-only paper. So I worked for 2 or 3, I think, at the time over my sort of time at university.
And what were you doing for him?
Writing.
Oh, you were?
I was a sub-editor, which means somebody originates the copy, the words, and somebody else looks at them and tries to make it shorter, smarter, neater, get the grammar right. And I was always good at that kind of editing.
Yep.
So
but doesn't that go back to what you first were going to do when you were going to do English, when you went to Cambridge?
Yes, I think it probably... Well, I never went.
No, I know, but you were going to study English.
Yes. I think it's always been an enjoyment of mine. I've always loved it, but I didn't really want to spend 3 or 4 years doing literary criticism of Wordsworth's poems written on Grasmere in 1872.
Right. Okay. Fair enough.
Although now, of course, it brings me terrific comfort, as so much poetry does. It grows on you over life.
Yeah, like a good wine.
Yes, or like seaweed on a rock in your case, you know?
Am I the seaweed or the rock in that analogy?
I think you're the immovable object.
I'm the rock. I'll take that as a compliment.
I like that.
Yeah.
Have you not got you've got an actor called Dwayne The Rock Johnson?
Oh, we do.
Yeah.
We do.
Yeah.
Yes. I think my wife said she quite liked his maneuvers.
I bet she does.
Really? Is he especially toothsome?
He is very handsome.
Oh, okay.
Toothsome. Interesting. So I think Chris knows that guy, his CEO, actually. Dwayne Rock CEO.
Really?
Yeah.
Let's get him on here.
We're going to try to.
Dwayne? Wouldn't that be fun?
Man. He's got a saying. If you smell what the Rock is cooking.
You jabroni.
Yeah. That he's got like
may have missed the.
Yeah, he's a wrestler. Anyway, back to let's get drop back in there. So now you're writing for the Times as a 20, not the Times, those
18
to 20-year-old kid doing sub-editing for newspapers.
University came to an end, and I possibly could have stayed on, but I didn't feel like I wanted to stay on.
Could have stayed on where?
I just felt that at 20-ish that it would be about time to go and do some things, not just sit there. It's very easy. I had many, many friends, and still have many friends at MIT and Harvard who teach, but they live in a cocoon.
Yeah.
Bubble is too generous a word because it means you can see outside of it.
Yeah.
Actually, cocoon is the better word. They can't see outside.
Yeah.
And that's not a good way to spend a life. I mean, we're here, I think, terribly simple purpose we're here. If you take away the 2 obvious ones, which is be jolly nice to other people, because it's just as easy to be nice as unpleasant.
I like that. Be jolly nice.
Easier.
Yes.
No. Then the other thing that matters is you're here to try and make sense of what's around you. The people, the atmosphere, the trees, whatever, to try and unravel a little bit about, because it's terribly easy to say everything is random. That the whole of Anaximander, the Greek philosopher, said all is but a woven web of guesses. And I think that's about the closest we come to things.
Yeah.
There are no black, white, right, wrong. You can impose them by law, or you can believe them through a moral code. But they're not written in the sky.
Right.
So you have to find your own way through these things.
And you can't do that if you're in a cocoon at some university.
I don't believe you can. You can philosophize about it, and you can theorize about it, but you can't practice it. And actually, theory without practice is worthless.
I agree with that. And there's a lot of people out there that live in that theoretical world and try to pontificate on how things should happen.
It's one of the things that scares me so about what so many people call social and I call anti-social media. The fact is that we lock ourselves into this little tiny block. Our vision becomes tunnel. Everything is on a screen. I don't know what it is, 6 inches by 4 inches. I don't know what the size is. That our world is only experienced through that screen, that we listen to endless amounts of possibly good sense, much of it twaddle, and we believe it, and we're being encouraged to accept it as truth.
Yeah, it's fact.
But actually it's opinion.
Yeah.
Right.
And it's terrifying because the generations to come who just look at this screen and see nothing, is there anything more dismal than going out to dinner and seeing a table of people silently staring at their screens while they eat?
It's maddening.
But it's not just that. It's such a deterministic future of irrelevance for our race.
Yeah.
It terrifies me. It absolutely terrifies me. And I spent a great deal of my time with both Charlie, who you know, and Hugo, who you don't know, saying there is a world out there.
Yeah.
You just have to look up an inch.
Yeah.
Right.
And it's all there, and it's jolly interesting.
Yeah, and I have the same conversation with my kids all the time.
And how
Put
do
your
you
phones
get
down.
on with that?
We just take the phone away.
Yes.
That's it. And then, their mood improves, their conversations, everything. Their mood is what, it's like you're taking away alcohol from an alcoholic,
Yeah.
or
Right.
whatever, drugs from a drug addict.
It's addictive.
And
it's an actual
they go through
addiction.
it. They go through it. You just watch them go through a withdrawal period, and then they come back and they're more engaged.
Have you any idea why that withdrawal period was so often called cold turkey?
No, do you know?
Absolutely no idea.
Write that
at
down.
all.
We'll put that in the next podcast.
Got
Yes.
it.
All right. So now you leave university. You no longer must change jobs at that point.
Well, I don't actually. I stay on in the press.
Oh, you do?
And I add to it writing books.
Wow.
So I started writing books.
First author on the show.
For various publications. Not-
Mike Nigerian.
Oh, that's right. He's an author. Yeah, he was an author.
And I met Elizabeth, my wife.
Where did you meet her?
Well, I had been in Morocco with a friend of mine.
What brought you to Morocco?
He got free tickets to a new holiday beach resort in Morocco if I were to write their advertising film.
You bartered.
So it took...
That's called bartering.
Do you know what? It took me about 30 seconds to write this film. We got 2 weeks in Morocco, and I ended up having Charlie 25 years later.
Amazing.
You know,
How about that for a nudge?
Yeah,
I'll just whip this up real quick. We'll head out to Morocco, have a nice time on the beach, and next thing you know,
exactly.
you got
I'm
Charlie.
sitting here with
And
you
now you're
today.
sitting here with
Exactly.
me. That's what we're talking
So
about.
our-
Those are the nudges in your
Our
life.
beginnings never know our ends.
That's right.
In any way. Anyway, so I come back from Morocco and I meet a man out in Morocco, rather good-looking man who is.
So you meet your wife out there?
No. He is a model in England. He's
Okay.
a male model, about 35 years old. He plays the sort of guy in the Rothmans smoking advert who's a pilot, has a Rothmans, Rolex, and Ray-Bans.
Yeah,
That
I
kind
got
of
him in my
guy.
head. I got him.
Yeah,
I see him.
So handsome.
And he was terribly
Tall.
handsome. An imbecile, it must be said, but
That's fine.
terribly handsome.
Yeah.
And,
Take off your shirt and close your mouth.
and he told me that when I get back to London, I should look up his flat, go to his flat, because there's 2 women there, both of whom are equally delightful. So I land in Heathrow about 9 o'clock in the morning, and I'm there at about 10:15.
Straight over there.
Straight over there. Still in my garb from travelling, with my luggage, which was all in one of those large straw Alibaba baskets, because I bought so much stuff in Morocco. I had to buy this basket you could put a whole person in and bring it back. And Elizabeth came to the door, and she was tall, elegant, wearing curlers in her hair. And I said, "Oh, Derek's asked me to come and make sure the flat's all right. Is everything okay? Anything I can do for you, etc.?" And she said, "No, I think everything's all right." I said, "Well, I'll just come in and look around." I said, barging past her like a Jehovah's Witness or a Scientologist. And I made myself a cup of coffee and asked if she'd like one, you know. And we chatted till about 11 o'clock. And she said she had to get ready because she was going out, etc. Anyway, I've cut it all very, very short. I ended up moving in with her there and then, and we got married about 3 or 4 weeks later.
You're kidding me.
You married her 3 weeks later?
Not very much longer.
And how long have you been married?
47 years.
Wow. That's amazing.
That's crazy.
The opposite to my mother. Perhaps I took the opposite lesson.
Right. How about that for a subconscious nudge right there? You know, she had a succession of husbands, to use your term, and
yes,
you locked one down, and
One
47
and
years later.
And startlingly, she's managed to keep her hands off my throat for almost half a second.
It's because you're feeding her Negronis.
I didn't know where he was going with that.
He makes her a Negroni every night at 6 o'clock.
What's a
And then they
Negroni?
sit down
A
and
Negroni is equal measures of gin, Campari, and a red vermouth. I prefer to use Antica formula. Some people use Martini.
Okay.
With a lot of ice, a little bit of orange peel on the side, and if you want to make it a long drink, you add Prosecco or soda water.
When you say long, meaning it takes longer to drink, or?
Meaning that it is taller in the glass and probably takes longer to drink.
Yeah. Yeah.
Slightly more fluid in it.
So now you've been stateside for how many days now since visiting?
3.5.
Are you making them here, or how are you getting along?
I've ordered them everywhere we've gone so far.
And can they make them?
Not at all.
Yeah. Okay.
Except I went to one Italian restaurant the first night with Christopher called something like Preza. And they were able to make a reasonable Negroni.
Okay. So that's the only place.
Yes,
Yeah.
but I order them wherever I go in the world. And I'm doing a lot of work for a moment for the Italian government, so I get Negronis by the dozen.
And who makes the best Negroni?
The Bar Basso in Milan, where they invented the Negroni.
That is the sponsor for the show this week.
Yes.
Bar Basso in Milan. If anybody wants to visit that, let them know Crowd Lending sent you.
Have a company trip.
We'll have a company trip to
I
Milan.
love that idea.
Yeah, who doesn't? So now, at what age do you go to Morocco and come back and a month later meet your wife?
I'm 21 and Elizabeth's many years younger.
Many years younger? How many years younger? There's not that many years younger than 21.
Don't forget the vector narrows as you get older.
Yeah,
so
I understand that.
But even a couple of years younger is 10%.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, was that what it was?
It was.
Okay,
yes.
all right.
Anyway.
According to the documents, anyway.
And we get on very, very well. I decide that I mustn't be seen as a threat to her. I tried very, very hard, so I phoned a friend of mine called John Fuzzy, who in those days quite a lot of men had long hair.
Yeah.
He had long, curly, blonde hair. And I said, "John, you have to be my boyfriend for the afternoon." And he said, "I don't want to." And I said, No, you have to. You really have to. He said, "No, I don't want to at all."
Yeah.
I said, no, you have to. I will owe you whatever it is you require for all of the rest of time. Anyway, he turns up and I say, "Lizzie, you've nothing to fear with me. This is my boyfriend, John." He says, "Hello." Anyway, so she's now relaxed.
Yep, okay.
Right. And we
Lowered
get
her
on very
guard.
well.
Wow, what a move.
What a move.
Tip the guard goes down. he can do his thing.
Let's get married.
Yeah, a couple of Negronis later and
Well, I said,
walking down the
what
aisle.
I said is, you've turned me. I
Yeah.
never realised.
Yeah, you're the one.
Yeah.
You turned me. I mean, that's amazing. What
I
a
mean,
move.
That's a compliment.
So now you're married
Yes.
and you're still, what are you doing for work at this point?
I'm still writing, and I get picked up from something I've done for the FT, I think it was, by Richard Branson. Do you know who
Yeah,
Oh, wow.
Virgin
Yeah.
Land, Virgin
And,
Island. What is it? Virgin Atlantic?
He
Virgin
says that-
Records.
Virgin Records.
He said that he'd read something I had written, and that he'd like me to come and have a look at something he was doing, and would I be interested in working for him? And he was just starting Virgin Atlantic Airways
Airways, yeah.
at the time. So I ended up doing some work on the side with him. So I'm now writing a bit for papers, a lot for books, and a bit for Richard.
So you're kind of like an independent contractor.
It's exactly that.
Bits and
exactly
dribs
that.
and drabs are coming in.
Yeah, totally. And trying to make a living out of any combination of the three.
Yeah.
And Elizabeth is working as well at that time. She's just bought a apartment, flat, as we would call it, and is doing it up. And she's doing very, very well on that. A little bit of developing, I suppose you would call it, but only for herself.
Yeah.
Only for herself. And I start work with Richard. I then get work with 2 or 3 other large corporations, and at the sort of C-suite CEO level,
Yeah.
so the chairman or the CEO, and I start writing speeches for them, because it's a fairly easy thing. If you can talk, you can put it down.
Then you can write a speech.
More or less, more or less. And I end up, roll forward 10 years or so, writing for a number of different governments and a number of different businesses.
As a speechwriter.
As a speechwriter, including one of your presidents. And
Which one?
I can't tell you.
Oh, you'd have to kill me.
And Nelson Mandela.
Oh,
when
wow.
I wrote his ANC acceptance speech when he was first elected. I wrote the speech for the governor of Hong Kong when we said goodbye to the empire in 1997. So I write sort of big set-piece speeches around the world.
Now, do you keep copies of those speeches? You don't?
No. I don't even look at them.
But you don't have like a notebook, like a... With
Like a scrapbook?
Scrapbook, that's the word I'm looking for. Scrapbook with the...
I still tend, when I'm writing, I write by hand, because it's roughly the speed at which I think is roughly my handwriting speed.
Okay.
Then I'll type it up and I'll read it through 150 times, and I'll fiddle and I'll play and
Right,
I'll
move a
fiddle
letter,
and I'll
yeah.
play, and I'll say that's redundant and this bit goes up here. And then I rehearse my clients as well, because they have to get used to it. And with the really adept ones, I use an earpiece. So they put an earpiece in and I read it to them behind the screen, and they say it at the speed at which I read it and with the intonation that I put onto the
Wow.
words. So it looks like they haven't got, they haven't got auto cue.
Right.
And they haven't got any notes, and
Right.
they can bestride the stage like a titan,
Right.
and what they're hearing is my irritating little voice in their head. And it works very, very well.
Wow.
And I do
Never would have known that.
Me either.
I do this to this day.
You're still doing that.
I do it most of the month.
Really?
I'm always booked 3 or 4 times over.
All right.
I can sell every day 4 times over.
You got a nice little business.
It's very good.
And so it's just you though, no employees.
No, that's wonderful.
Oh, I bet.
I can't begin to tell you how marvelous it is.
Oh, I can only imagine.
Absolutely no one to
Ugh.
work with.
I believe me. Take a look around here. I got all these personalities I got to deal with all the time.
Be strangely lonely at times,
Yeah.
just because I mean, for example, I've been here 3 days, I think, and every morning I've had calls at 4 a.m. People who want to talk to me from Rome, Australia yesterday, Norway this morning at 4 a.m., and saying, oh, I need to do this. And I've got to wake up, sort of pull myself out of my
Slumber.
nocturnal affairs and get to a point where I can actually have a sensible conversation and not sound like I'm pre-senile dementia,
Right.
you know. So it's demanding, and the way you shrug it off is you put your prices up and up and up until the work drops off.
Right. Yeah.
Never say no.
Just
Never. Never
I'll
say
do it,
no.
but it's going to cost you X amount of dollars.
Absolutely.
And if they say yes, then you say, well, I'll do it then.
And I always say, by the way, I've got 5 friends who are much cheaper than me who'll do you an equally good job. And they always say, no, we want you.
Wow, isn't that nice?
No, it's
I feel like that's
because
reverse psychology.
You've painted them into a corner.
Of course. But I also think it's nice.
Not that you know, because America has no idea about how to sell things, does it?
I don't know. I don't sell.
No, I know, clearly.
I'm the product. See, that's what I'm the product.
That's true.
So
That's true.
I do so enjoy your adverts for pharmaceutical products.
oh yeah.
It's quite extraordinary.
Yeah.
It's quite. We have no such advertising in Britain.
We'll make
We
you
have
sick and then sell
something
you
for
the
a
cure.
bit of indigestion.
That's right. Yeah.
You know, but that's about it.
No, it's every other commercial for us.
It's
Right.
startling.
Yeah.
It's absolutely
Oh,
startling.
big pharma's got their control over a lot of things.
Do you
Everything.
think that they
Everything.
are the new industrial military complex of the 21st century?
I don't know, but these aren't topics that we talk about on our
Oh, of
podcast.
course, I forgot. A trigger.
You're gonna have to go
Trigger,
you're gonna
that's
have to
it.
go talk on another podcast, not with me.
I suspect after this, my career will be short-lived.
Well, we'll
I
let
think it's just getting started.
we'll let the audience speak to that. So now, but now you raised 2 children.
Yes, Hugo, the older one.
How old is Hugo?
So Hugo's 36,
And how old is Charlie?
29.
Why did you name him?
28.
I love
Why was there
I
such
love
a-
the name first. We'll get to that, but I love the name Hugo. So where does that name come from? Is it
Right, so with Hugo, we put Post-it notes. Do you know the little yellow
course,
Post-it
yes.
notes? On the inside of the wardrobe, and I bought my wife a set of darts.
okay?
Put all the names we'd like, and I said, now just choose which ones you want. And it was Hugo, Bertram, good heavens, HBJ, John Randolph Philion. Hugo, Bertram, John Randolph Philion. And
Wait, that's his whole name?
that's his name.
Wait, I thought you were picking the names.
Me too.
He has 5. Say the name again.
So, Hugo, Bertram, John Randolph Philion.
Why so many? Why 4 names?
Because we decided they all worked well together. And he was born at 1 kilo, which is very little. It's sort of breakfast over here in the Marriott.
Yeah.
You know, and he was in an incubator for 16 weeks. This is answering the question I know you're going to ask. And after that, we were so terribly worried
Yeah.
that the next child would be equally premature that we left it for a very long time. And we found out, and Charlie was born at 3 pounds.
Okay.
It's also very, very little.
Yeah.
And he was also in incubator for a very long time. And it turned out that all of this could have been avoided by my wife taking a 75 milligram aspirin once a day.
Once a day, yeah.
None of these problems at all. However, there it is, and it's made them both very, very
But she
strong.
gets her Negroni every day.
Every day.
6 o'clock.
Yeah.
6 o'clock. And then they sit down and chat.
That's nice. Catch up
And
on the
then
day.
Charlie, I knew when we saw him what his name would be. So Elizabeth, Charles Henry Alistair Michael Philion Champ.
Oh, wow.
Wait, he has 2 last names?
Charles Henry Alistair Michael Philion. CHA.
Champ.
Oh,
Champ.
gotcha.
Exactly.
I wish I had known that.
Me
I
too.
would
I'd been
have
calling
called
him
him Champ
Champ
the
for
whole
months.
time. I'm so mad right now.
Me too. Wasted time.
Yeah.
Wasted content.
He's gonna be Champ from now on. So so how has your stay in the States been?
Marvellous, actually. 2 or 3 things. The last time I was in Boston was probably 35 years ago. It's obviously undergone, I suppose, more change than Britain did after the Luftwaffe hit.
Yeah,
it,
it's undergone a renaissance. I would
It's
say.
extraordinary. And we had a very nice walk around the sort of water area.
Yeah.
I'm sure it has a name.
Seaport.
Seaport.
Yeah.
Yes. And it's beautiful.
Yeah.
It's lovely. It's a charming city, much greener than I remember.
It's because it is much greener now.
Is it?
Yes, it is.
It wasn't just me.
No, it is not you. There was highways. All the highways used to be above ground.
Yes.
So all the greenway that you see now is
Yes.
none of it existed. And and by the way, the seaport didn't exist.
It's just lovely.
Yeah.
It's just lovely.
The seaport's only 10 years old, maybe.
Yeah.
And then I like Quincy. I think it's charming.
It is. It's a
town.
great town.
I expect to see Jimmy Stewart popping out of the grocers at any moment. You know,
Yeah.
It's got that our town kind of.
It sure
feel to
does.
it.
Yeah.
What is the hotel I'm staying?
The Marriott.
Marriott is ghastly. It's like Auschwitz with hot and cold running water.
Not sponsored by the Marriott.
Yeah. Sorry, Marriott.
I mean, it's perfectly agreeable. You've got a bed and you can sleep there, etc.
It's a very industrial.
It is. You are
hotel.
being processed.
It is just
You
you're
are
just
being
there to.
processed.
There's no bells and
Character.
whistles. There's nothing.
No. But you know, and they treat you absolutely lovely. There was a large wedding, an Indian wedding there at the weekend, and they decided that they really ought to use the tabla drums. So there was a 2.5 hours of non-stop drumming from 8 o'clock in the morning till 10:30, and then 8 p.m. at night till 10:30.
Oh God, that's a little much.
And there's only 600 of them, so not too bad, I suppose. And the fact is, it's rather strange, isn't it? Because clearly the Marriott's policy is that takes precedence over their guests. Because all the guests who weren't there found it objectionable to be assuaged by drums, assaulted day and night by this noise. And yet
I would love to
They
read your
didn't
Google
care.
reviews.
care less.
They didn't
Care
care.
less. No,
Yeah,
no.
well, that's big money. The wedding business is a big business.
Yes, but then they ought to say to you, well, then your stay is on us, or something like that.
Do you know how to sell?
I don't.
Well, usually you don't give things away
There
like that.
isn't another job, is there, in life?
Everything. Yes, everybody's
What-
selling.
What job is there that isn't selling?
There isn't one.
You know?
I agree.
Mm.
Everybody's selling something. Everybody's selling.
Sell yourself.
Sell yourself. Selling services. Selling something.
Yes.
So I'm gonna do something that I usually don't do, but because I don't usually ask this, but we're coming to our end of our time here. Do you have anything else you'd like to say to the audience? Because I don't usually do that, and I just feel
Never
like
do that.
I feel like this.
Well, this is the first podcast I've ever
It is.
been on. It was very... I mean, I looked at the one you'd done with my son, Charles,
Yeah.
and I thought you were very adept, very adroit, very acrobatic conversationalist.
Wow. I know.
And I welcomed the fact that you didn't push the firm and push what you're doing, because it took it away from just being this, I'm being led down a path to somewhere.
Right.
I thought that was very, very nice, that you let the soft power element of it do the work for you, not the hard sell. And I think you've done exactly the same. I think what I'd really like to say is there's a bigger world out there than Britain or even America, and that it's a world that's precarious at the moment in all sorts of ways that it never really felt this way before. I think we're in the middle of something as bad as the Cold War, with what's happening with China and Russia and Ukraine. But because we're better armed and now in instant communication one with another, it's going to be far more devastating and long-term, the effects of this. I think that obviously the main problem that everybody wants to say something about, but nobody's going to do anything about it at the moment, is global warming, because we don't have anywhere else to go. I'll tell you, have we got a minute?
No, we don't.
I'll give you 1 minute. I was on
Amazing.
Waterloo Station when I was a child, and there was a man there who had a board. He used to walk up and down the station, and it said on the back of the earth, on the board he carried, "Flee the earth, the end is nigh." And he was a religious individual. And I said to him, and I was about 12, I said, "Flee the earth, great. Where are we going?" Well,
Right.
that's my feeling about global warming. There is nowhere yet.
Right.
We cannot move from here. It's just as easy for Elon to put his money into making this place better than making Mars habitable.
This is
It's
true.
impossible.
That's if you believe in global warming.
It's impossible. Well, whether you do or not,
I agree.
whether
I know.
you do or not, there's something profligate going on. Our packaging is out of control. Our consumption, our range of choice. I'm looking out from the Marriott Hotel to a completely empty office block, the same size as the hotel. I can tell it's empty at night because all the lights are on, as is the air conditioning. There's not a stick of furniture over the 9 floors of this hotel, yet the lights and the air conditioning is on. What can they be thinking?
Yeah.
When you buy a pear or an apple in England, it comes robed in plastic, covered in polystyrene, and put in yet more plastic. Why can't you just put a pear
And pick it up.
Either that or a paper bag,
Yeah.
which degrades. It's just, we're being, whether this is happening or not, and I don't know and you don't know,
Fair enough.
why would you be so profligate
Yeah.
with what we have? So that's, I think, probably where we should.
Well, what I like the most, what I've enjoyed is your message via both your stories and you've said it, is to be more observant of what's going on around you, right? Just the fact that you're looking out the hotel window and taking note of what's going on in the building next to you. I don't think everybody does that, right? I don't think everybody's as observant of that or even cares that the building next door is empty with the lights on and the air conditioner blowing, and they're not thinking about what is going on over there. They simply walk past it as if it's a ghost that they'll never see again.
Isn't that going back to stop looking at your phone?
Yeah.
Look outside the window. Tell your children there's a bigger world than America, there's a bigger world than Britain. Charlie has benefited hugely by being kicked out of Britain and coming here. He's found a whole new culture, a whole new way of dealing with people. His next move will be some other country,
Yeah.
probably not next back to Britain. And we all have this ability to wander the earth. There is a fantastic amount to see.
Yeah.
I've got more air miles. I can get to Jupiter.
Right.
Sadly, not back again, my wife says, but there you are, or happily. But that's the point.
But and this is the last thing I'm going to say. We are going to wrap this up. But just picking your phone, picking your eyes up off your phone isn't enough. You also have to observe and take note and think about what's going on around you. A lot of people could look at that building, and again, they wouldn't even register that the lights are on, or why the lights are on, or why. I found that very interesting, and I think that's sort of the message, right? Look around, but don't just look around to look around. Look around and take note, and try to figure things out, like you said. Try to figure out what's going on around you.
Be present in it.
Be present. Well, Ian, thank you very much for coming on. I really appreciate it.
What a great pleasure. And thank you very much indeed.
Without fail, they interrupt my exit, but that's okay. It's like I always say, if anybody needs anything out there, give me a call because everybody needs a nudge. Thank you, Ian. You were great.
Take care.